All right, let's dive into one of the absolute game changers in Indian constitutional law, Maneka Gandhi versus the Union of India. It's a story that kicks off with something as simple as a passport, but believe me, it ends up rewriting the very meaning of liberty for over 1 billion people. It sounds almost too dramatic to be true, doesn't it? Can one person's passport issue really change the rights for an entire country? Well, the answer is a huge, resounding yes. This one case, all started by a single travel document, completely revolutionized the power dynamic between the Indian citizen and the state. So, how did this all happen? Let's get into it. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the passport that kicked this whole thing off. Then we'll rewind a bit to understand the old, pretty restrictive way the law used to work. After that, we'll see how the court created the revolutionary Golden Triangle concept, which in turn completely redefined personal liberty and led to a landmark shift in the judiciary we still feel today. You know, every massive legal story has a trigger, a starting point. And in this case, it wasn't some complex corporate battle or a major crime. Nope. It was just a simple government order taking away a single passport. Okay, so the timeline is pretty straightforward. On July 2nd, 1977, Maneka Gandhi's passport gets impounded, basically seized by the government. The reason they gave? Just this super vague phrase, in the public interest. So naturally, she asked for a better explanation, and the government flat out refused. That's what pushed her to go straight to the Supreme Court, arguing that this violated her fundamental rights. And that one petition set the stage for a judgment in 1978 that would completely reshape Indian law. Now, to really truly get how revolutionary this case was, you have to understand the legal world it walked into. The Supreme Court wasn't just looking at the law. It was actively pushing back against its own very rigid, very restrictive past decisions. This was a big deal, especially in a post-emergency India, where the courts were trying to reestablish their authority. So before this case, the main way of thinking came from a case called A.K. Gopalan. And the idea was that fundamental rights were all in their own separate little boxes or silos. A law that touched on personal liberty didn't have to be tested for, say, fairness or equality. They were just totally separate. The Maneka Gandhi judgment came in and just demolished that whole silo approach. It established for the very first time that these core rights are all deeply connected. And at the heart of this old way of thinking was this one crucial phrase from Article 21, procedure established by law. Before 1978, the courts took this super literally. It basically meant as long as the government followed all the right steps to pass a law, that law was valid. It didn't matter if the law itself was totally unfair or unjust or unreasonable. It was all about the process, not the substance. And this is where we get to the core genius of the judgment. This is the big idea the court came up with, not just to deal with a passport, but to create a whole new way of looking at the Constitution. So to break down those silos, the court introduced what we now call the Golden Triangle. It's this beautiful idea that 3 of our most important fundamental rights are inseparable. You've got Article 14, the right to equality, Article 19, the right to freedom, and Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty. The court said they don't stand alone. They form this interconnected web of protection. So what did this mean in practice? Well, the result was absolutely revolutionary. From now on, any government action that touched your personal liberty under Article 21 had to pass a triple test. It wasn't enough for the process to be correct. The action also had to be fair and not arbitrary to pass the Article 14 test, and it had to be reasonable to pass the Article 19 test. Just like that, the old silos were gone for good. So with this golden triangle in place, the very idea of personal liberty and the government's power to limit it was changed forever. This led to a complete makeover of that phrase we talked about, procedure established by law. The Supreme Court said, hold on, a procedure can't just be something that's written down and passed correctly. It has to actually be just, fair, and reasonable. This was a massive, massive shift. In a way, it brought in the spirit of the American idea of due process, which says the substance of the law has to be fair, not just the steps you take to make it. All of a sudden, what the law said was just as important as how it was made. So why is this case drilled into every first-year law student in India? Because its impact was nothing less than a constitutional earthquake. Let's just quickly recap the absolute core takeaways here. First, the court threw out the old restrictive A.K. Gopalan ruling. Second, it gave us the powerful Golden Triangle doctrine. Third, it completely redefined procedure established by law to mean something that is actually fair and just. And maybe most importantly, it signaled a huge change in philosophy. The court was now going to be an engine for expanding our rights, not for limiting them. I think this quote just captures the whole thing perfectly. It really wasn't just a win for Maneka Gandhi. It was the beginning of a whole new era for the Indian judiciary, an era where the court fully embraced its role as the ultimate protector of our rights against the power of the state. But the legacy of this case is kind of two-sided. By weaving these rights together, the Supreme Court gave us this powerful shield to protect our liberty. But it also created a brand new challenge for every single lawyer and judge who came after. When all these rights are connected, how do you balance them when they start to clash with each other? And that is the huge, enduring question that the Maneka Gandhi case left for us, and one that the legal system is still trying to figure out today.